Now we're going to look at the Congress of Vienna, which lasted from September 1814 to June of 1815. It was held in Vienna, Austria, and you may wonder why it took them almost a year to come up with their decisions, and that's because Napoleon returned from Elba. All of the great powers had to stop, head back home, pull together their troops, and then meet Napoleon at Waterloo and defeat him one more time, and then send him off to one more location for his exile. And that location he will actually not return from. So the people who are making all of the decisions at the Congress of Vienna, you have Emperor Francis I of Austria, Viscount Castlereagh of Great Britain, Tsar Alexander I of Russia, King Frederick William III of Prussia, and Prince Talleyrand of France. Prince Clemens von Metternich will be Austria's diplomat, and he is going to be a dominating figure at the Congress. His whole purpose is to make sure that all of the countries are on the same agenda, and that's the agenda of the conservatives. And von Hardenberg will be the diplomat working with Prussia. So what exactly are their goals or their aims? One, they would like to restore the balance of power in Europe, and that means all of the countries, the great powers, would be on equal footing. That France, Great Britain, Russia, Prussia, and Austria are all seen as equal nations in power. Great Britain prefers to see that the continent is on equal footing and that they are always a little bit above the rest, but they will play that out a little later on. Another goal that they have is to remove all of the freedoms gained from the revolution. So any of the rights that people gained, the spreading of Enlightenment ideas, they want to crush and pretty much act like the Enlightenment and the revolution never took place. They're hoping that by doing this, the people would forget and they would be able to just go back to the old order, and the conservatives and the nobles and the monarchs would all be back in power again. In order to do this, you need to put the ruling families back on the throne. So the legitimate rulers need to be put back. Whether they're alive or not, their families need to be back on their throne. And ultimately, what they would like to achieve in Europe is a lasting peace. Let's create a society, a world, where war does not happen ever again. How would they actually achieve this? They're going to have to create new European borders. And one big reason for these new European borders is to keep France in check. France they saw as the aggressor. Through the French Revolution, the rise of Napoleon setting out to create this vast empire in Europe, they needed to make sure that France was surrounded by strong countries. So if they would try to cause trouble again, then countries that were their neighbors would actually be able to step in and stop them. So strengthening France's neighbors was ultimately a goal here, but they're going to do so without actually stripping France of their own military defense. Prussia, a nation that has the strongest standing army in Europe, will border France. The Low Countries, which will become Belgium a little later on in the 1830s, will be overseen by Austria, which Austria is loving that because they're allowed back on that side of Europe again. They are going to allow Switzerland to come back as an independent country. And the German states. What Germany was hoping to achieve was an independent nation. Now that Napoleon was no longer in power, the German nationalists thought they could actually create a united homeland. But Austria had other plans. Austria had been removed from the German states at the end of the 30 Years' War in 1648, and this became an opportunity to regain control over this territory. So as the hosting family or hosting nation, they were pretty demanding that they wanted to oversee this land again. And so the creation of this German Confederation allowed Austria to do so. Austria was one of those 39 German states, and being a strong power out of those 39, they're the ones who actually get to make the decisions. Unfortunately for Austria, there's another country that has some territory in that German Confederation, and that's Prussia. And Prussia and Austria are going to butt heads a little later on. So restoring the monarchs, or putting the legitimate rulers back on the throne. For France, that's going to be the Bourbon dynasty. We all know that Louis XVI was executed and that his young son was also killed during the Revolution. So the next in line would be Louis's brother, who becomes Louis XVIII. Spain, their monarch was forced off the throne under Napoleon, and Napoleon had put his brother on the throne in Spain. Portugal, he did set out to take Portugal and the royal family. King John had actually fled to his colony of Brazil, and he waited it out there until Napoleon had been defeated, and then he came back and reclaimed his throne. The Kingdom of Sardinia and the Papal States will also be restored to what they consider their rightful leaders. So how in the world do we prevent war from ever taking place? Well, they decide that they need to create some kind of alliance system. So in 1815, we're going to use alliances in order to prevent war, but when we get to 1914, the alliances will be used to actually go to war. So at this time, we have two alliances we're going to look at, the Holy Alliance and the Concert of Europe. Now, the Holy Alliance wasn't one that really did a lot to actually prevent war. It was just this idea that if the monarchs pledged to follow Christian principles of charity and peace, whether they were Catholic, Protestant, or Eastern Orthodox, that they would actually create an environment where war would not need to erupt. So if we're using charity and peace in the way that we deal with each other as leaders and how we deal with the people who live in our country, then there would be no reason for anyone to declare war or rise up and try to rebel. But the alliance system that really was the focus of trying to prevent war would be the Concert of Europe. And not everyone was on board with the Concert of Europe. Great Britain was a little leery of this particular alliance because it expected a lot of the members in Europe. First, they would agree to hold future meetings to keep peace in Europe. And the reason behind this, they can make sure that all the decisions that were made at the Congress of Vienna are upheld. They can make sure that the borders that were redrawn are protected. And if any issues would actually come up, any conflicts between nations, then the Concert of Europe would be used as a mediator. But the part of this alliance system that really scared Great Britain was if each member needed help, then the other countries were supposed to send troops to help them. And the focus here was to crush all revolutionary activity. They knew that just because you took away the rights of the people or tried to eliminate the Enlightenment ideas, that they just don't disappear. And the people are going to continue to fight for their rights. Well, they were hoping that each nation would come in and help each other crush any revolutionary activity. And particularly Austria and Metternich were hoping that the other countries really would come in and assist them. Great Britain personally likes to pick and choose when they enter into any conflict. Some conflicts work to their benefit to just sit and wait it out and then reap the benefits from it, and other times they join in to stop it because, again, it works in their favor. I know the next few slides cover the Metternich system, and your packet doesn't have any information to fill out, but I just wanted to share what the framework was when they were coming to meet in Vienna. So you have Metternich, he represents Austria, and Austria is a very diverse empire. You have a lot of different ethnic groups speaking different languages, practicing different religions, and being part of the Habsburg Empire, you are to speak only German and you're to only practice Catholicism. And so Metternich knew that with the spread of liberal ideas and nationalistic movements, that was going to lead to a lot of trouble for Austria. And they wanted to try to maintain that old social order, unlike what happened in France when the old regime was destroyed. Everything went chaotic and the monarch lost his power, and so did the nobles. Well, Metternich is not wanting that to happen in Austria because he's going to be out of a job and possibly would have to flee the country. So he is going to do everything in his power to try to maintain a conservative control on the Austrian Empire. So his system does encourage European rulers to resist any threats to the established order. So if you see any liberal groups starting to rise up or any nationalistic movements, crush them. You censor all the written materials that's going out there, you find the movements, the underground movements, and you throw the people in jail. And for Austria, they knew that their strongest attack would actually come from those German Confederate states, those 39 German states. This was the area who desperately wanted to have their own homeland. They wanted their independence. And now that they're under the control of Austria, they're going to rise up and rebel. And they did so. And a lot of these movements that rise up throughout Europe during this time is going to come from students, younger generations. And in 1819, Austria will issue the Carlsbad Decrees. And this was a spy system that was set up to report on all liberal groups and to make sure that all the newspapers were censored. And anyone involved in these movements would be thrown in prison. Metternich encouraged that all the other countries do the same that Austria had done. And as Austria moves throughout the 1800s and the 1830s and the 1840s, they're going to continue to deal with more and more revolutions, not just in German states, but they're also going to deal with issues down in Italy. They're going to deal with issues over in those Low Countries. They're going to deal with issues in the Balkan regions. So for Austria, they are desperately trying to maintain control over their empire.